So our veggie review. If you were in this webinar last year, you'll remember that Wes and I get a lot of questions on what are the most appropriate varieties of vegetables to grow in Utah. And you can see here from these social media posts, it tends to be something that a lot of people worry about. I think these are snippets from the Utah Gardening Experts page, and you can just see the engagement with each of these posts of people wondering what to grow, talking about what they've done in the past. So it tends to be one of the biggest questions that us in horticulture get here at USU. And, we don't have any living documents. We've got some fact sheets on harvesting, planting times, and a little bit on varieties. I have sessions where I actually get together with some of my buddies and we scheme about varieties that we're interested in and highlight some things that we want to do. We look at catalogs, okay, and try to pick varieties. But it's really hard to test every variety that there is out there, especially when you're talking tomato varieties. I just think it's almost impossible. And so because Wes and I have been scratching our heads on this for a while, we decided to kind of develop a veggie review, kind of like what a few other regions have around the country. And Wes put a lot of work together into putting a survey together. And, we really wanted it to be something that people could refer to and that it would continue to grow, not some sort of fact sheet or catalog where you have all of the good varieties from 2018 and everything that's been developed since doesn't exist, or anything that we weren't unaware of doesn't exist. So we really wanted it to be living and lasting. So last year we introduced it at this conference. Here's kind of like a little snippet about the survey. But I just wanted to mention that we had about 250 reviews last year. And Wes and I didn't want to skew those results. So we actually didn't put any of our own data in there, even though I probably did 8 tomatoes on my own, 4 cucumbers, and 6 or 7 different peppers. So going forward, now that we know we've kind of got a larger sample, we'll probably start putting some of our stuff in, and we'll walk the talk rather than we'll walk the walk rather than just talk. But yeah, I think that was a really great start for 2025, given that we only introduced it here and then we posted it about it a few times on the Utah Gardening Experts page. So where did those reviews come from? So we did get some good distribution across Utah, which was really exciting. It didn't end up just being Davis and Wasatch County or anything like that where we're housed. We actually got a lot of reviews out of Cache, Salt Lake, Davis, Utah, and Box Elder. But that being said, 16 counties in total were involved. So I'm really excited to see our southern counties represent a little bit stronger here in the future, as well as some of our Wasatch back counties that are a little bit colder. That way we can be a little bit more representative, because it's always hard to give a recommendation based off of, growing in Salt Lake City for somebody that's growing in the Heber Valley. So which cities in these areas contributed the most? You can see we got a lot from Farron, which I thought was really surprising. So Wes, do you know if that was maybe one user in Farron based off of kind of some of the flavor you get from that, or was it multiple people?
Yeah, I think that all of the ones from Emery County were that individual in Farron. So if you're on here right now, thanks for contributing.
That was really great. It was exciting. So, and that's kind of one of the things that's tricky with what we've got with this style that we're doing it in right now. And I'll explain more about that right now. But you can get some overrepresentation here and there. But yeah, I mean, look at all of these unique locations across the state. And so while we try to make it to where, well, we do make it to where, you can't be identified by your reviews. we do try to make it to where we get these regionally specific reviews so that if you're in Fruit Heights, you can get recommendations for people in your community versus those of you that are down in Kearns and are going to have a little bit different growing degree days, soil conditions, and irrigation water, and the list just goes on. So let's talk a little bit about the top crops that were reviewed. And I probably could have guessed all of these, but the beans. I was really surprised that the beans had so many reviews. Tomatoes, hands down, that's what people tend to get passionate about in their backyard. And it's probably because it's so hard to get a good tomato at the grocery store. And just the quality is so much higher from a homegrown one. Cucumbers, yeah, I can see that. There's people that get so excited about this cucumber that they're growing. I got a buddy that's really into cucumbers here in Kaysville, and so he's always trying new ones along with tomatoes in his backyard. Peppers for sure. Lots of people interested in peppers, and the summer squash. I think there's a few reasons why people get excited about it. One, a little bit different flavors, different yields, things like that. But I think a lot of us are seeking different summer squash for resistance to a few of the problems we have with them. Specifically last year, I grew summer squash that are known to be unpalatable or less attractive to squash bugs to see if I could trap my squash bugs in Hubbard squash. And it worked really well for me. So that's something that I should probably toss into those reviews coming up is I didn't really have squash bug problems with the ones that I was picking for myself because I was able to keep the squash bugs out of them. But yeah, the beans are really surprising to me. That said, when we grow beans here at the Botanical Center in our demonstration garden, we have varieties that we really like and varieties that are mediocre. So I totally get it. So let's jump in a little bit more to tomatoes. So as you see here, there's nothing really new that's showing up in our top cultivars that were reviewed. I have grown every single one of these personally, both at the Botanical Center and, well, I maybe haven't grown Celebrity at the Botanical Center just because I know so much about it. But I've grown them all at home. And I agree. I think Sun Sugar is a wonderful little snacking cherry tomato. It's got really good yields. It's always been super sweet. I'm thinking back to, in my garden, how my girls will go out and we'll take the biggest bowls in our kitchen and we'll just fill them up all the way with the Sun Sugars. And so when I read this actual like qualitative information on Sun Sugar, where it says an extremely high yielding orange cherry tomato that is larger and more resistant than Sun Gold, has a sweet flavor, almost fruity flavor, a favorite of visitors in my garden, I totally agree. Like, I feel like that's been my exact experience, although I actually pick them a little bit younger, so they're not so sweet because I tend to see they get super, super sweet. So, and this is kind of one of the drawbacks. Some of the well-known varieties that are pretty good might become overrepresented, and we might get a little bit of an echo chamber effect that we see in social media and other social projects that Wes and I are going to try to address with some things that we're doing right now and in the future. Furthermore, on tomatoes, though, Wes got really excited when he saw this Azoycheka. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's a Russian variety, I believe, or at least East European. And when I read the extended review information, this qualitative stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, I totally get why Wes put this in here. That is the exact kind of tomato that he's looking for. And so, I think this is one of the little gems, the little diamonds in the rough that we get with these reviews. You may have never noticed it in the catalog or thought about it, because in a catalog, they're trying to sell every variety of seed that they have. So it's all positive stuff. And sometimes they outshine each other. But when you get these little tidbits of it saying, it will produce as early girl, but has a tangy, sweet, almost citrus flavor, that can be really exciting for somebody that's trying to find something new. And so, yeah, I'm excited to try this one too, Wes, and some of the other Russian varieties to kind of see how they work out for us. So let's go ahead and talk about one of the other exciting things that we got with this. When we're asked these questions, we often get asked, well, where should I buy my seeds? And, we really have to be impartial. We don't want to endorse specific seed vendors as a university because we're here to serve everybody, including the businesses here in the state. And so what's nice about this is this creates a really nice big list of online and local vendors that people can just use as comparisons. That said, one of the drawbacks could be, that whole echo chamber effect. So along those lines, and Wes, did you want to add anything here? Or did I cover that okay?
No, that's great.
Okay, awesome. Just waiting for it to advance the slide. There we go. So let's talk about where people actually go ahead and give us a little bit more information. We're calling that extended review. And they give us some comments about what they grew. I am one of those people that tend to try to fill out surveys pretty quick, and I don't always fill out this information, the kind of additional, what do you want to tell us about this thing? And I found that this is probably some of the most valuable illustrative stuff for us. So look at this Blue Venture cabbage. Absolutely the longest holding cabbage I have grown. Very long harvest window. Has a good sweet flavor, and heads grow larger and larger without splitting. Oh, that's awesome. You can look at how this pepper down below is a Basque variety. And, so if you're looking for Basque recipes, that might stand out to you because now you can get those specific flavors that you were wanting, that right terroir that you were seeking. And then let's go ahead and move on. I'm trying to make sure I'm pacing okay to some of the other information that we collected. So nutrient management, we wanted to know kind of the experiences that people had with these. And we've noticed sometimes management can give people a bad experience or a really good experience. So we tried to kind of collect some of that data too. And so when it came to organic versus conventional versus both, and when we say both, we mean people that are implementing a little bit of organic practices with a little bit of conventional, kind of taking a hybrid approach, which is kind of something that I do at home. That seems to be really popular, but then there's also a lot of people reporting back that they've gone full organic. And then, some people are like, well, I'm just conventional, but I honestly think when we really get down into the nitty gritty, we all tend to kind of do both, or we're strictly organic if that remains a key concern. So that's just kind of how you split the tomato on our nutrient management for growers in Utah that have responded to the survey. So let's talk a little bit about the shortcomings. The first and foremost that I've mentioned is I worry often about echo chamber effects, where we might get a lot of purple, where you've got our screen right here, where we might get a lot of purple basil reviews, and that becomes extremely popular or unpopular, and so there's some things that we got to work out there to figure out how we mitigate those. But one of the other main things is because it's just a survey, it's really hard for us to aggregate those data and make them in a usable form for the average user. And so Wes really went through a long, time-consuming process of of manually keying all of this into a spreadsheet that we have on our website. So if you go to the garden.edu, there's this blue banner towards the top of the page that kind of gives you suggested planting dates and so on and so forth. And you can see that little line item that says view our Utah Veggie Reviews spreadsheet. And that will take you to this spreadsheet that's just right below. Now, because it's only view only, because we don't want people messing with the actual spreadsheet itself, it can sometimes be hard to see that kind of extended review section. And so what I recommend people do is they do file, make a copy, save it on their computer or in their own Google Drive, and then they can manipulate that stuff a little bit better on their own and add charts or whatever they want to do. So yeah, so those are the big drawbacks. The fact that we have to take those outputs and put them into a usable form. It's not real time because Wes this year had to go back and take hours and hours and hours keying them in, which was cumbersome and can kind of be emotionally taxing. I don't know if you'd want to do this for 20 years, Wes, if you end up getting 2,000 reviews and you have to do it manually. So if you have ideas, I mean, feel free to follow the link that will be at the end of our slides, and we can probably get that tossed into the chat there for everyone too. But we have some ideas for the future. So right here to the right, we have Cornell's Veggie Review Guide that they do on the East Coast. This is what we're working towards, but we hope to make it even more user-friendly because this was probably developed, 15 years ago or more. And so it has that older HTML style that can be a little clunky. But we want people to really be able to have a more friendly user experience. And one of those that's really important is whenever people are doing the surveys right now, they actually have to go in and put in all of their contextual demographic, like where are you from stuff. And we love to make it to where there's a user portal that just saves all of that information. So you can just get in there and update varieties as you do it. We'd love to be able to add photos. I think photos are worth 1,000 words. And then, if we've got these nice drop down menus, you're going to get a lot more uniformity in cultivar names. So you don't have, carbon coming up under 4 different spellings and then looking like they're 4 different varieties of tomato. And then we want it to be visual and easy to digest. So what Wes and I are doing, and Wes is taking the lead on this, is applying for a grant with the state of Utah to develop this tool. And one thing that could be great is if we could get a few letters of support from growers saying how this will help them and really provide a good resource for people here in Utah. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Wes, before you jump into the tomato trial?
Sorry, this sharing screen controls is a little awkward. I was trying to unmute myself. But no, yeah, I guess no, yeah. Yes, thanks, Cody. I think the only thing I'd add here is this in go back here. We really do invite you, and this is at the end of the slides, and I will populate it into the chat to hear your thoughts about what you'd like to see. We've had that open, and I think we only had a few people that entered that, which is totally understandable. But we actually are trying to implement. One of the thoughts was to be able to develop some sort of batching system when you're inputting your reviews. And so we're going to incorporate that into the tool. So we really do value your input and what you think and feel would be useful in this sort of tool for you and for others across the state. So we value and welcome your feedback on this. It's definitely, as you can see, if you've looked at it, very much in the beta phase, but we're encouraged by the participation so far and think it could really be a very useful tool for that really hyper specific locale regional, reviews that are just difficult to come by on seed catalogs or anything like that, like Cody talked about. But
Hey, I did want to mention there was a really interesting thing added into the Q&A for us that was saying, can we sort the reviews by elevation? So that would be a useful question because we all know elevation correlates with latitude changes in climate and stuff. So that was
yeah,
really interesting.
yeah, and I think I have thought about that. The trade-off is always, well, not always. The trade-off in this situation is gathering enough information from people to be useful and to help, but also protecting privacy and people, don't want to be giving out their home address so we can have that on a map so people can go look at their garden. But I do like the elevation, and we might go about that through collecting zip codes and then just auto-populating that elevation. But it's definitely thanks it's something we're considering as well, for sure. So I wanted to just share about these homegrown tomato trials that we've been doing kind of concurrently. Well, we did concurrently last year, and it's something that I've been doing up in the Wasatch and Summit counties for the last few years. And this is a similar type of model. It's kind of complementary in which we really want to start, as Cody said, eliminate, just using early girl and celebrity as tomatoes. So we want to keep introducing new varieties for people to try out and be aware of. And so this is one way to do that. And again, specifically focusing on tomatoes, but we're hopeful that the model can continue to be expanded into other crops. So in 2025, this project included 5 different counties: Cache, Davis, Iron, Wasatch, and Summit. So we got a pretty good mix in there, and as it was currently run, we had participants of the Master Gardener program that volunteered to grow out the tomatoes, and reported, and we took some metrics on those. So last year we trialed 3 different tomato cultivars, and you all may be familiar with all of them or some of them, but Brandywine, specifically Brandywine Red, it's a very popular heirloom variety, Mortgage Lifter, and Moscovich. And so we chose a few different types of tomatoes to try and get a spread. Um, I, of course, had to throw in one Moscovich that is touted as being early maturing and does okay in the cold. So what we did was we had the participants take 3 plants per cultivar that they were interested in growing. And we grew those plants up for them and then provided those plants to them, and they transplanted out at an appropriate time in their area, which varied, of course, across the different locations. They transplanted and then grew those plants as they would normally in their garden, took notes on when they first harvested, and then had a post-harvest survey that was a simple 1 to 5 kind of star rating matrix, with 1 being bad or good, or bad in all of these ratings or different criteria, and then 5 being the best in all of them. And so wanted to go through some of the data that we got, and that's kind of how that adds up. Anything that's higher is better in this scoring system. So we looked at the harvest amount, right, or the yield. We wanted to know how well these did in continuous production. So they're all indeterminate varieties, and we wanted to know if they had this kind of lull in production during our really hot time during the summer, or if they were able to keep producing through that whole season. Look at the cracking resistance, the blossom end rot resistance, the taste, and then just kind of an overall, would they be interested in growing that again? So the next few slides are in this same format here, and just showing there on the left the different cultivars, right? Brandywine, Mortgage Lifter, and Muscovich. The N means the sample size, so how many uh, people grew that cultivar. And remember, they're reporting on an average of their 3 plants that they grew. So, and then below each of those cultivars, you have a breakdown of how many people or participants were growing that in the different counties. So we had here the first thing that we were measuring is days to maturity. And I guess I'll amend what I said about the rating because this one is obviously a an outlier in that the rating corresponds to that days to maturity. So we can see here, Brandywine took the longest to mature, and that was expected. What was unexpected here was that Mortgage Lifter was reported an average days to maturity of 79 days. So that was quicker than we were expecting. And when digging into the data a little more, there were some question marks in my mind on some of the days to maturity that were reported. So that speaks to the inherent difficulty of this model in which it is user input, and there's an inherent lack of data control and uniformity. And so that's again that's kind of baked into how we're doing this. And it is something that we will account for going forward by removing some of those outliers that statistically are outliers. Um, but I'm presenting all the data here as I received it. So Mortgage Lifter and Moskovich were both on average just under 80 days to maturity.
Hey, Wes, I did want to jump in and say that we really tried to even the playing field too by making sure all of these varieties were seeded the same day and we provided the plants.
Correct. Yeah. And so that is it's a good point. That's one way we tried to eliminate some of the noise in the data collection was providing uniform starts for all of these. Yeah, it's a good point. So looking at this continuous bearing metric, you can see that Brandywine was rated the lowest with Mortgage Lifter and Moskovich. Again, you're seeing on that y-axis only 2.8, right? So that's not great. And comparatively, there's, is that a realistic difference? It's hard to say definitively, but those are the reportings on that metric. Cracking resistance saw both Brandywine and Moskovich outperforming Mortgage Lifter, and we heard from the earlier presentation. Well, I guess we heard about blossom end rot, which we'll see coming up. Again, this is highly influenced by your management practices, and so the hope with these sort of trials, where it's a real outsourcing and community source data collection, is that we can get enough people trialing these that we get the true macro trends still shine through some of the noise that's created by so many different environments. But you can see here that Brandywine and Moskovich performed better in this regard. BER, blossom end rot resistance. Again, so this is phrased as it's resistance, so the higher the rating is, the better here. And again, a similar trend with Brandywine and Moskovich outperforming Mortgage Lifter. I saw this in my trialing of these, particularly Moskovich, had great resistance, or it had a real lack of blossom end rot, while I did see some on the other two. Taste, of course, this is maybe the most subjective of all, but again, just trying to aggregate everyone's ratings to get a sort of average. And so you can see, and this one was very surprising to me, and because Brandywine is touted as, you know, people love the flavor, but in our ratings, it came up lowest. And again, those differences aren't huge. It's not a 2 to 5 or something like this, but it was outperformed or out rated lower than Mortgage Lifter and Moskovich. And then the kind of overall, would you grow it again? Moskovich seemed to outperform in that metric again by a few points. So, tomato trial, the challenge was always getting people to report. This is totally expected. Everyone's got a million things going on. And with the community science approach, it is a little difficult. But that's something we're continually trying to not be too annoying to people who are helping us with this, but also get people to report. Because we unfortunately only had about a quarter of the people that got the tomato plants that ended up reporting back on their experience. So that's one thing we're trying to address as well. And then, of course, we're hoping to continue, potentially expand into other crops as well, but that'll probably be in subsequent years. And we did limit it to those in the Master Gardener program just because there was an added layer of responsibility because they would see us and interact with us more often. But I think if you're really interested in participating, and especially if you are doing this on your own and want to add data to this conglomerate, we'd be welcome, or we'd welcome those emails. So send me an email, send Cody an email, Wesley Crump at usu.edu. Here at the bottom, we have some links and resources. So when we send these out, these will all be live links, and you can view them on your own time. So with that, I think we are right at time, and I will stop sharing this screen.